I really feel like it is important for people to feel empowered in and through technology. There's a lot of opportunity, economic, career, creative, and I don't want people to get or feel left behind. In the technology space, particularly in cybersecurity, people tend to feel overwhelmed and self-select out of the conversations, but even worse, out of the career opportunities and engagement opportunities.
Have you ever noticed that some of the best ideas come from unexpected places? Your next breakthrough may come from a leader facing similar challenges, but in a completely different sector. Welcome to Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop. Join us as we explore how today's successful leaders inspire, influence, and connect with others. Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board, who have teamed up to spotlight how great leaders and communicators are making their impact in the world. This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs, ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. As a proud GW graduate myself, I can attest that faculty members combine academic rigor with real-world lessons that can't always be found in textbooks. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. I am thrilled to introduce today's guest, the former White House cyber and AI czar, Camille Stewart Gloster, who is a strategist, attorney, and executive whose cross-cutting perspective on complex technology, cyber, and national security and foreign policy issues has landed her in significant roles at leading government and private sector companies, including, like I said, the White House, Department of Homeland Security, Google, and Deloitte. Camille has a very storied background, long bio. Here's 3 things I think you should know about her. Number 1, as the first Deputy National Cyber Director for Technology and Ecosystem for the White House, Camille advised the president and led national efforts on technology, security, emerging technology, and cyber workforce and education. She played an integral part in the drafting and implementation of the 2023 AI Executive Order and sat on the White House AI Council. Number 2, previously Camille served as Google's global head of product security strategy, and before that as head of security policy and election integrity for Google Play and Android. Number 3, Camille co-founded the hashtag Share the Mic in Cyber movement and the hashtag NextGenNatSec initiative, which was formerly the Diversity and National Security Network, to support investment in a highly skilled and diverse workforce, which we're going to talk about today. Both of those efforts serve to highlight the need for increased diversity in the cyber and national security fields. Camille, you have been called many things over the years, from a fellow at prestigious institutions like Harvard, New America, the Atlantic Council, and the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a member of Business Insider's AI 100, a SANS Difference Maker, a Root 100 honoree, a Microsoft Security Changemaker of the Year, a CyberScoop 50 Cyber Industry Leadership honoree, and the Cybersecurity Woman of the Year in the Barrier Breaker category. Today, we are thrilled to call you a Chief Influencer. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I am really thrilled to be here. For background, you and I had a chance to meet when I moderated the fireside chat with you at the Public Affairs Council's conference. And I was just so impressed, not just with your expertise in AI, but your ability to take complex information and translate it for normal people like me who are not experts when it comes to things like cybersecurity. And I thought, just to start off today, what does it mean when I say that you were the White House AI and cyber czar?
Yeah. So first of all, I think this is a conversation that needs to be happened. It needs to be happening at a kitchen table type conversation. And so I try to show up in a way that is relatable and easily understood. My job at the White House essentially was number 2 on cyber, advising the president, focused on AI, emerging tech like quantum, supply chain security, privacy, and cyber workforce. So I was focused on the future. The office is a new office in the White House focused on harnessing technology to live up to our greatest ideals. And in an effort to do that, you have to think about, what does the future look like? What do we want to use technology for? How do we want it to show up in our lives and show up for us as individuals? And my job was to think about what that looked like and then build policies and set priorities and corral the public and private sectors around those priorities to advance that future vision that we set.
Hmm. It sounds like a tall order.
Yeah. It was a lot of work. And the nice thing was is there were a lot of leaders in that office who were focused on this awesome, big, ambitious, but extremely important problem. And so I commend the folks that are still in there working on this day in and day out. But yes, it was a tall order.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about AI. I mean, the field of AI has been advancing at a pretty astonishing pace. And that means, new developments that we're excited about, but also some challenges, alarming concerns about societal disruption and, of course, things like disinformation. So maybe we can kind of take a step back and you can tell us a little bit about how you became an expert in cybersecurity and AI. And I just got to think back to like your childhood. Do you ever imagine you're going to be working in the White House or working on these issues?
I wish that my imagination was that grand. When I was younger, I actually aspired to be an attorney. My dad is a computer scientist. And so I grew up on computers early and tinkering with them and sitting in the back of his computer science classes. And so I had a lot of technical acumen pretty early and a lot of interest. But for some reason, I decided I was going to be a lawyer and I would make my parents sign contracts for every promise that they made me. And as I grew up, I decided I needed to find a way to blend those two interests because my call towards technology and the way it was showing up in our lives was only growing stronger and bigger. But I did still really want to use the law to contextualize those problems. And what I later realized is that, lawyers tackle complex issues and leverage the infrastructure around them, the law usually, to advocate for a position and to understand something and to solve a complex issue. And that's what I wanted to do. Was I liked the complexity around challenges that were big. And so in that aspiration to find a way to blend the two, after law school, I got pulled into a cybersecurity company that focused on open source threat intelligence. So combing social media and online forums and chats and things and kind of figuring out what intelligence was out there to inform companies and governments, et cetera. And I quickly realized that I could blend my two interests and it not be me protecting the technology of others. I could be both technical and a lawyer at the same time.
I love that. From being a kid making your parents sign contracts, I bet you find that now in the work that you do, while you might wish you could get people to put their promises down in that way, it's a little bit more difficult, right? There's sort of gray areas. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you have to influence different types of stakeholders in the work that you do in cyber and in AI.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole job. I mean, a lot of the work is about getting groups that are motivated by different things to align in a way that advances a larger set of values or goals. Sitting in government, my job was to pull together the private sector, civil society, academia, and all of the agencies within the executive branch to align around where we should go. So when you think about AI, there's a real opportunity. This is like the burgeoning of the internet. So much about society is going to change, so much about how we search and, understand healthcare and all of these things are going to evolve in the advent of this new technology. And that both creates fear, but so much opportunity. And we've learned so much since the advent of the internet about the kind of collaboration that needs to happen for us to be proactive and to build resilience and to prioritize things like security and safety up front so we don't have to think about it on the back end. And so a lot of the job is, okay, I know you are to a certain extent motivated by the bottom line, but understanding that you operate in a global context, these things need to happen. As well as, okay, mission driven folks, whether that's government or civil society, the mission is important, but you know, our economy must move forward and the innovation ecosystem needs certain things to thrive. So, how do we balance the scales on these interests and move towards a common goal? And when you take the time to understand where both sides are coming from, you find that there are a lot more similarities than differences, and that the things that might seem different usually rely upon some of the other motivations. So, for example, civil society might want to make sure that smaller countries are brought along for the journey and investments are made so that they can have access to the opportunity of an evolving technology, AI, for example. That benefits companies, expands their market, it creates a global ecosystem with more harmonized regulation and infrastructure and governance that they then don't have to keep changing and adapting to. And then from the government perspective, bringing everyone along for the journey, the internet is global. It's not, you know, limited to one country. So doing this work from the outset with a global mindset only benefits the advancement of the mission from a government perspective as well. And so usually you can find some commonality, and that's where I start, understanding the motivations and then driving towards a conversation that's rooted in the commonalities and can build from there.
Okay, so that's obviously a really important lesson of sort of seeking to understanding those motivations, looking for areas of the commonalities instead of differences. I'd also just love to hear, I bet there are other lessons that you've learned in your journey about how to influence others, whether, especially very powerful people, right? Because you work with a lot of people who are very, very powerful. And what are some of the things that you know now that, you know, maybe you didn't know as much when you were starting out, or you wish you knew then about how to really break through the noise, influence, get your message across, et cetera?
Yeah. I mean, first is truly understanding the boundaries and not overstepping them. I mean, there are some non starters, some red lines for every world leader, industry leader, you know, organization. And to have a real conversation, a fruitful conversation, you can't try to push past or blow past those. So, I mean, that is something that you should understand in setting the boundaries of the conversation you have. But to hone in on a piece of the first lesson, the understanding people's motivations and who they are and what their priorities are, whether that's people or organizations, is like really integral. And not at a surface level, but truly understanding why, how they came to that understanding or that perspective is the foundation for any progress. Making assumptions about where people are coming from or why their perspective was formed in a given way and not leaving room for them to be heard limits your ability to have a conversation. So really focusing in on that as the foundation for any negotiation or conversation or opportunity to influence is so important. And then that'll help inform those boundaries and the way you negotiate and finding those commonalities, things like that. And consistent and open and transparent communication is also extremely important. Where you are delayed, where you are falling short, where you're confused, all of those things create an opportunity for candid conversation that facilitates the trust that you need to get from competing priorities to some sort of alignment. And then also sometimes you got to recognize when to give up. Not every issue can you make progress on at a given moment. And so it might not be ripe in this moment. So let's find some progress on another issue and then circle back at a time that is more beneficial.
You know, talking about that, you sat on the White House AI Council and you worked with senior leaders in, you know, the biggest, most valuable technology companies in the world, as well as inside of our government. Do you feel like that enough progress has been made in terms of this, you know, pretty new technology for most of us? And, you know, what does it take to sort of have those types of conversations? When do you just say, okay, never mind, we're not going to agree on anything, or okay, we've come to something and now we're going to, we're releasing a statement, or there's voluntary guidelines that technology companies are going to follow. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, both from the standpoint of what was accomplished, but also how influence was part of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think anybody who works on these issues acknowledges that there's more work to be done. But we have had a strong start. I mean, between the UK AI Summit and the one in Seoul and the one to come in France, the AI EO we put out, the EU's AI Act, there has been some meaningful flags planted on where we should go on artificial intelligence. And the public understanding and excitement, but also fear about the evolution of this technology is actually a really good thing. I think it propels national leaders across the world to take action, to understand the opportunities and the risks, and then we can convene together to have meaningful conversations. I think industry has come to this conversation recognizing that we are in an environment and a time in society where government is keen to put boundaries on things that could change the very nature of how we operate. And the regulatory landscape is different. And so fighting that is not actually going to be fruitful. It is better to collaborate, to encourage a more holistic understanding of the technology itself so that the policy and regulations that come out address the root causes. That's what you want. You don't want something that's addressing the implementation of the moment. Like, let's legislate for chatbots. I mean, that doesn't help us because that evolution is a short moment in time. And we need to make sure that the things that we legislate for can evolve with the technology. And so I think that a lot of the foundational work laid out in the AIEO and in some of the legislation that's come out around the world, and even at the state level, at least starts a conversation and starts a regulatory framework that can illuminate the places where we have duplicative efforts, where there are opportunities, and where there are gaps. And I think that is the biggest thing that I would encourage all policymakers at this point, is to make sure that when they are legislating around AI or contemplating some kind of policy around AI, they really look at the legal landscape and understand where there are opportunities to augment existing legislation and frameworks, or where we need new regulatory schema. And then fill a gap, don't create duplicative and conflicting requirements. And then on the side of industry, it's really important for them to illuminate the impact of regulation, to be collaborative and cooperative, and to engage in this dialogue meaningfully. If we have that coming together with the strength of civil society and their ability to ideate and think about these issues, I think we will continue to make a lot of meaningful progress. But yes, there's lots of work to be done. We need a international governance structure that allows everyone to reap the benefits of artificial intelligence. And we need a harmonized set of standards and requirements that allow for all companies to meet that burden, whether they're small or large.
As you were talking about, we can't just regulate chatbots or something, because that's sort of yesterday's thing or today's thing. And we need to be thinking about the future. I remember hearing you say once before something about creating policies around our values rather than around specific technology. And I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit, because I think that's a really powerful way to think about getting people on board and bringing disparate groups together when you're trying to, influence them.
Yeah. So one of the things that, and I was in the National Cyber Office, is that we thought about what our aspiration is around technology. We wanted to figure out where we wanted to be. And so the National Cybersecurity Strategy is written in a way that articulates an affirmative vision rather than a response to a threat or a technological evolution. Where do we want to be? And I think that understanding of values, that understanding of where we want to go, allows for a more proactive posture, a more resilient posture, and allows for better policy, quite frankly. And so then the challenge becomes, what are those values? What are those values domestically? What are those shared values internationally? And those are really the ongoing conversations. If we're doing policy right, it is focused on what are the things we seek to protect? Is it our right to privacy? Is it our right to be able to make sure our family is safe and secure? Is it our access to government services? What are the things that we seek to protect? And how does the technology have the power and potential power to limit that access, limit the provision of those services? And if we're doing that work, we will make really strong policy. And it's easier to do at a domestic level, still hard. I mean, just think about the divisions on where the lines are on privacy and access to healthcare and all those things are domestically. But it's even harder to do internationally, where there are different regimes that think about the use of technology different and how government can use technology differently and how industry shows up on that ecosystem. And so that values aligned discussion, I think, is really important happening at the White House in the advent of this office. And I think that's really great. And I hope it continues to permeate into international fora and we can continue to find common ground. But in the technology space, that can be really hard because it is a tool that everyone wants to wield in a number of different ways. And so I think if countries start domestically aligning to their values, then we can find those shared values and build from there.
And, for folks who might be listening to this and they're not working in an international policy environment, I think it's something you said that really sticks with me is the framing of how you approach something. Any organization, any leader is going to face challenges, obstacles, and uncertainty. Framing it as from a negative point of view of addressing that is very different from articulating your future vision and where you want to be and doing it in a more proactive way, an affirmative way toward that vision. And I hadn't thought of it, from a policy standpoint that way, but as you described it, it occurred to me that's actually what I think so many great leaders do in how they communicate, whether it's the future vision of their company or an industry or a nonprofit. Isn't that right?
I agree. Every inspiring leader sets a vision you can get behind, an aspiration or a reality that sparks the most fundamental things inside of you, either aspirations for yourself and your family or the world in which you want to live. And I think when we start from there, that's the root of those values, right? The things you seek to protect and to see flourish in your life or in the society around you. I agree. Many of the things that make a strong leader are the same, whether you're in the public sector or the private sector. And I encourage every leader to start with a strong vision.
Yeah. Well, to switch gears a little bit here, early in your career, you were a legal fellow on Capitol Hill, including for Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, who's from my hometown, Kansas City. When I was last back in Kansas City, I was talking to friends and family about things in the news, such as AI. And I noted that obviously, people who are just going about their daily lives and don't work in policy or aren't in Washington or world capitals are probably thinking about these things in a little bit of a different way. But some people were really excited about AI. Some people were really terrified. A lot of them were just kind of disinterested. It wasn't a big topic of conversation, even though maybe they'd heard of ChatGPT or something. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what do you think the American people need to know about AI and technology trends? Because certainly just the digital revolution that we've all lived through has really made a huge impact in the way we communicate with one another, whether it's friends, family, companies, the government, right? I mean, when we were very young, at least speaking for myself, there weren't websites and apps and video chats and calls. And so these things have made a really big difference in just terms of how we live our lives. And I'm wondering, how is AI going to impact just the relationships we have with one another? So as you think about just the public, what do you think the public should know?
Yeah, I mean, we are in a similar revolution, right? AI will change the way we relate and connect. And I want people to feel empowered. I think often, to your point, technology and even worse, cybersecurity makes people feel overwhelmed and kind of self-select out. And they feel like they have no agency and control over how things evolve. But quite frankly, people have a lot of agency and control. Companies need to be responsive to the needs of their users. So be vocal about what you want to see from the technology providers that bring you new things, whether that's, the latest version of a chatbot or how search evolves. There is an opportunity for them to be responsive to your needs. AI is not going to go anywhere. I mean, the use of it will change, and so the manifestations will change. But I encourage people to try to get up to speed, play around with some of the Chat GPT, Gemini's, Claudes of the world, and see how it can make your life a little bit easier. But please remember that it is a tool, not a solution, right? It can generate ideas for you to then workshop, but it should not be the way you do your homework or the way you answer even an email. It can generate the first draft, but you've got to do some work. So I would say to people, one, feel empowered, get involved, be vocal about what your needs are and the problems that you hope that this technology solves for you. Two, get on board and get trained up, because you will likely start to use, you're already probably using AI at work, but you will probably start to see generative AI in some of the more commercial manifestations that you're starting to see in public come across your desk and be a part of your day-to-day responsibilities. And even if not, you'll see it in your more social settings, and use that as an opportunity to advance yourself professionally.
Mm-hmm. When I look at some of the marketing and advertising from the tech companies that are integrating AI into their solutions, I wonder if the message that they're getting across to consumers is that message of, this is going to just be a tool to help you, or if some of that, if they're actually showing examples that might sort of be counter to their, the core values that they want to communicate about, this doing something for you. An example that was in the media recently was about an ad around a young person writing a letter and using AI to just kind of do it for the person, rather than kind of showing people who use AI a lot, say, actually, this would have been really great to proof the letter or generate ideas for the letter. But in the commercial, quick TV spot, it kind of was just like, have it do it for you. And I'm wondering if some of their external messaging might actually conflict with their values and what they sort of say in deeper conversations that they hope this technology will make possible.
Yes, that there is a real opportunity to prioritize education in the midst of promoting a tool or a capability. And often there is a disconnect between how those conversations are happening in the organization and how they come out in a short commercial or marketing installation. But they have a duty, in my personal opinion, to steward how people use the capability. Not the only duty. Governments, educators, parents, community leaders all have an opportunity, and I think to varying degrees to different people, an obligation to help cultivate and direct how AI integrates into the toolkits that we all have as individuals. But I do think companies have a responsibility in that regard as well. I mean, just like when the internet and Wikipedia popped up, and there were a bunch of teachers who were like, don't use Wikipedia. It is not an authoritative source, and got really upset about it. That was a moment in time that maybe that was, correct, but the evolution of that instruction became use it as a lead generator, and then use that to point towards authoritative sources and fact check this, right? Like, because you understood that someone was going to use it. And so just like the education ecosystem will have to evolve in terms of how you use some of these chat functionality, so does the companies that are putting this technology out there. Because Wikipedia tells you that. Wikipedia tells you it is a crowdsourced tool that you can use to kind of get a quick understanding of their capability. And I mean, they're a little bit different because Wikimedia is a nonprofit, but that kind of clear narrative about what the capability is and what the capability isn't, I think is increasingly a responsibility that companies need to take on.
Well, I can remember that narrative, Wikipedia, don't use
Yeah.
that. And then I can remember the counter narrative. Actually, this study showed that Wikipedia articles are often more accurate than
Yes.
encyclopedia articles. And certainly they have the opportunity to be updated in real time,
More up to date.
be more up to date. But of course, neither is a silver bullet for knowledge, right?
Right. Right.
So I think, that's a really good
Which
analogy.
takes me to one of my soapbox issues, and I won't say anything too long, but this is why we really need a focus on critical thinking and understanding how to get authoritative information and do the research in schools, and just so people feel equipped to know, when do you stop past Wikipedia? What places can I seek information? And that will include tools like AI.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue. Your soapbox is a perfect segue to something I want to ask you about, because of course, all these tools are created by people and they're used by people. And you've been a huge proponent for making sure that more people are interested in fields like national security, cybersecurity, AI, including folks from diverse backgrounds who maybe otherwise, wouldn't have realized that they had a home in those fields, as well as younger people. And in fact, for those of us who can see you, for those who are watching versus listening, you have the ABCs of cybersecurity behind you, and you have a fun story about that. So maybe you can kind of talk about, what you think is important in that regard, and certainly if you want to tell the story of that book, that might be a good way to kick off.
The ABCs of Cybersecurity is a initiative that came of a convening at the White House. Before I go to that, I really feel like it is important for people to feel empowered in and through technology. There's a lot of opportunity, economic, career, creative, and I don't want people to get or feel left behind. And in the technology space, particularly in cybersecurity, people tend to feel overwhelmed and self-select out of the conversations, but even worse, out of the career opportunities and engagement opportunities. And so in my role as Deputy National Cyber Director, I really honed in on localizing and contextualizing conversations within communities around cybersecurity and technology. And so we did it for a number of communities, but one of the first was the Black community in Black History Month. We hosted the state of cybersecurity in the Black community, and there were a number of investments committed to diversifying cybersecurity, from funders like Craig Newmark, the creator of Craigslist, and from government agencies and companies. But one of the most fun was a teacher and author of a series called The ABCs of HBCUs. And she does a number of books on financial literacy and technology literacy, all of these things for kids. And she committed to writing one on cybersecurity. And when she wrote it, she sent me a copy for me and my daughter, and I was in it. And so it was just a nice little nod to the work and acknowledgement. But more importantly, I'm excited that there is yet another kids book that talks about cybersecurity concepts. And I just really feel like as we move through this space, it's important to open up the conversation and to have it in a way that people can relate to and recognizes the realities of how technology shows up in their lives and how they might use it, and then translates that into issues of import and how that connects to things like cybersecurity.
Absolutely. And, we know how important it is that everybody have an opportunity to be in these fields, because we learn, the fields depend on having the knowledge that comes from people of all different backgrounds and lived experiences. And so seeing the efforts that are happening, even at the youngest age, at the ABCs level with that book, is something that, probably most of us didn't know was going on in cybersecurity. And I think it's really cool that meeting inspired the book, and that you're featured in a children's book. Another one of those things that you probably couldn't have imagined that would happen.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Camille Stewart Gloster, I just want to say, so grateful that you were able to be part of the show today and share your story with us. And I think the work that you do to influence folks all the way from the public to world leaders about critical topics like cybersecurity and AI is really inspirational. And so we're so grateful that you could be with us today. And I want to say thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Chief Influencer, a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board. If you know a leader who should be featured as a Chief Influencer, please nominate them at chiefinfluencer.org. For show notes and more, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn. Until next time.